mysterious names with
Coming
black
up.
skin.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm Leah from Connected AU, and we are so thrilled to have Christian White with us to discuss his latest thriller, The Ledge. Christian has once again delivered a book that keeps you guessing right to the end. From its chilling setting to a twist that leaves you speechless, The Ledge showcases Christian's talent for crafting gripping, unforgettable stories. We're excited to explore the inspiration behind The Ledge and also Christian's journey as a writer. If you have a question that you would like to ask Christian, please just pop your name into the chat and we will get to the questions at the end. Welcome, Christian. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for that brilliant intro. Can you just come around in my normal life and introduce me to everyone? That's brilliant.
Once
I
the
love it.
recording that I send you, you can play it as often
Yeah,
as you like.
exactly.
There you
I'll
go.
have it set up, and nice to meet you. And I'll just play your intro. That'd be great.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I wanted to just start by saying huge congratulations on all the incredible success that you've had so far and for crafting such a fantastic book with The Ledge. It
Thank
really
you.
does keep readers on the edge of their seats with its relentless suspense and very powerful twists. Can I ask, what was the inspiration behind The Ledge?
You know, the original inspiration, it started off as sort of a sort of different in a way. I really wanted to write a kind of a love letter to all the books and movies I loved as a teenager, like like Stand by Me and It by
Oh,
Stephen
great movie.
King and
Yes.
The
Some
Goonies
classics.
and
Ah,
Lord of the Flies, all of
yeah.
that sort of stuff. I wanted to write my version, write my Stand by Me. And originally, one of the earliest things I wrote on a post-it note was coming of age thriller. That's what I thought it would be. And then and originally the entire thing was going to be set in the 90s because that's when I came of
Yep.
age, and it was just going to be these teenage boys. And I actually wrote an entire draft where it was you know how the book alternates between past and present, and the past
Yes.
is that 90s storyline. And originally I just wrote an entire 90s storyline, and I thought that's what it would be. But then, as you inevitably do, it's funny because I started from such an external place looking in. I wanted
Yep.
to make it feel like a coming of age thing. But then as soon as I started writing, this inevitably happens.
Mm,
You start to draw more and more on your own life and your own
yeah.
journey and everything. And I started to think a lot about my childhood, and I ended up pouring so much of myself into Justin and that group of friends. And
Mhm.
I really started to think about how important my friends were. This will probably shock you. I'm glad you're sitting down, but I wasn't a really cool teenager. I was a booky, alternative, nerdy kind of kid, and so I had to found and I found a group, a very
Yep.
small but close knit group of people like me, and for
Found
a
your people.
while, yeah, I found my people, and for a while they were you know, they felt essential to me surviving puberty, and so I
Yeah.
was thinking more and more about that and drawing more inspiration from them. And I started to think, oh, it's kind of depressing. I don't see any of them anymore. You know,
Right.
how are these people? How are
Was
they
so important at one
so
point in
important?
your life.
Yeah.
Yes, and you've
And
lost
a
it.
couple of years ago, I went off social media, and I used to be able to stalk them. I can't even stalk them
You're not
from
on at all right now.
yeah,
Wow,
no, no,
you're
no.
an anomaly. That's very,
Yeah,
very rare these days.
exactly.
Yeah.
So which makes me feel, I mean, it's wonderful for every reason you imagine, but it's
Yeah.
also you feel a bit isolated. You don't actually know what people are doing. And
Hmm.
but then suddenly I got interested in the kids in the story and thinking, oh, where will they end up? And I sort of sat down to explore that and wrote what ended up being the first chapter of the book. I never intended to have the current day story. And it was this frustrating thing because as soon as I figured that out, I knew it was the right move, but I also knew I had to just completely rewrite the 90
You
story because
created a lot of work for yourself too by, yeah,
because it could,
juxtaposition. Yeah.
if you're writing just a linear story, you can do all this stuff and you're not beholden to anything. But
Yeah.
when you alternate, you've got to
Yes.
certain reveals have to come at certain times, and one
Yeah.
needs to feed into the other. So
A lot harder.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was frustrating, but that was I mean, God, it was so long ago when you asked your first question. It was about inspiration, and I think I kind of answered it.
You did. You
Yeah,
did.
good,
Yes.
good.
Yeah. And so I want to know as well, When you wrote your first draft, that twist honestly was one of the biggest surprises I've read. I loved it. I was like, oh, when I read that twist, and I
Love
don't
it.
want to ruin it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. But did you know that twist when you first started writing, or did it kind of just evolve as you developed the story? Was it in the
That,
first draft that was?
no, that one evolved as soon as I started to write the adult story
Yeah.
and really figure that out. Then pretty early on, I figured out that's what I wanted to do, and then it was, how the hell am I going to do it? And because
Yeah.
the best twists, in my opinion, are ones that I don't think a good twist should come out of left field. I think the reader should have everything they need to figure it out, but it's just about presenting things in a certain way and playing on
Yes.
their assumptions and things like
Yeah.
that. So I really need, I want to earn my twist, so that's when I did, that developed pretty early on. As soon as I went back and started writing both timelines. Before that, I had a completely different twist in mind. That parts of it made it into the story anyway, in the kid's story,
Yeah.
and a lot of the structure was sort of similar,
Mhm.
but yeah, I had a complete, and that always happens every single time I've sat down to write a book. I have come up with what I think is a brilliant twist.
Yes.
I get halfway through and I realize the twist
It
is terrible.
changes.
It's not going to work. And then
Okay.
but usually, touch wood, so far so good. And I found this. I'm working on my fifth book at the minute, and the same thing has happened.
Yeah.
Eventually, I find that right twist, and
Right.
then
It will
I'm out.
unfold.
That's
Yes.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a very clever twist. And after I read it, I did go back in my head and and did like little fact checks, and it all was like spot on. So
Love it. Yeah, I made
good
sure that
job.
if you go back and read it again,
Yeah.
I didn't cheat.
No.
Actually
And
knowing
that's
a
what made
couple.
it so masterful, I think.
Oh, well,
The
thank
way
you.
it was done. Very
A couple
skilled.
of people have said they went back to the beginning to see
Yeah.
if I cheated, and
Yes.
then felt like, oh, it was obvious. What? But of course, of course, it's obvious when you know.
When you know, yes.
Yeah. There's just a couple of places
Yeah.
where it was just a little sleight of hand, and really that was I take part of the credit, but really it's so much of what I do and so much of my process is about thinking about the reader and thinking,
Hmm. Their
you know,
journey.
yeah, and I do I write film and TV as well, which I love movies and TV shows,
Right.
but they're very it's all done for you. It's a passive form of entertainment because everything's there. Whereas
Visual. Yeah.
reading, the reader brings so much to it because you say John has a beard, so
Mm.
he has a beard. The reader puts everything else in. That they do so much work, and so much of this twist in particular, but all of my twists, there's the reader is an accomplice. I'm
Yeah.
really letting them
Yeah.
join some dots as well. So it's yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
really fun process.
Yeah. Very cool. So you kind of touched on the fact that you kind of maybe had a bit of bullying, experienced a bit of that sort of stuff at school, and your school friends really helped you survive high
Mm.
school. And then you kind of moved out of touch a little bit. How much of your childhood experience is woven into this story? And did you share this story with those high school friends? Have they read the book?
Well, let's first part first. There's a lot of me in all of the characters, and there's actually a lot of certain traits of different people of my group are in there. There's no one character that's based on one
Right.
of them, but they're all, I was
Woven.
into ghosts and paranormal stuff, and we had some guy, who in real life he didn't turn out to be gay, but in real life he would always talk about women like in girl, but you knew that he was just full of shit. And
Right.
we had all of that. We had all of those sort of elements,
Yeah.
and I don't know if anyone's read them. I do know one. So at my book launch, a friend who was in that part of that group turned up at my book launch. I hadn't seen her for I don't know, 15 years or something, and she flew down from Brisbane to and just showed
Okay.
up,
Yep.
and that was really weird. So I know she's read it, but she was and it was really lovely. It was really great, but it was a really odd experience.
Hey,
What she did? She
is her
came up
name
to me.
Benita?
No, 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 no. I did know a Bonita, but
Yes.
that's not her. No, no.
Um,
And she came up to me, and I hadn't seen her, like I said, for 15 years or something.
yeah.
and she'd got all my books. But one of the first things she said to me was, you know, I had to pay extra. She was sort of annoyed because I only had carry on the airplane, and the books put me over limit, so I had to pay extra for the. And
For
I
the
was sort
book.
of okay, maybe it's okay that we haven't hung out in 15 years, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but no,
That's
no, I
fun.
don't know. I don't know if any of them. I hear every now and then I'll run into someone's mom or something like that, and
Right.
they're always really supportive, like, oh, I've read your books and everything.
Yeah,
So I assume, but who knows? Yeah, it's a weird.
right.
I kind of don't want
And
to know.
it's
I
hard to
would
check when you're not on social media as well, I think. So,
exactly.
and can we just talk about the setting and sort of the intensity of the ledge? I think it added so much to the atmosphere of the whole story. How did you firstly think of that setting? And do you think that it influenced your characters' journeys? Was that one of
Yeah,
the first things you thought of?
yeah. Well, we actually had I had a the ledge in my childhood. I
Okay.
Unlike the boys in the book, I didn't grow up in the mountains. I grew up by the sea, but we had a ledge that we would. I'm not proud of this, but I would often wag school, and we would wag school and go, which you could. Now you can't.
Much easier back
You'd get
then.
it.
No.
Yeah, you'd get a text. This was before
Absolutely.
mobile
Yeah.
phones and all that sort of stuff. So we'd wag school and we'd go to this ledge and we'd just sort of hang out there. And it's one of those weird places where I don't know how we knew it existed, but it was so hard to get to. You'd go down a path and then you had to
Mm.
duck under a fence and scale around a rocky path and all and climb up. And I don't know how we knew it was there or how we found it or if we did find it. Um, but that was certainly a real place. And it was just one of those places I kind of think every small town has those places
Yeah.
where the grown-ups don't know about, the teenagers can go and they kind of hold court and it's just become sort of this mini Lord of the Flies,
Yeah.
where there's always you'll always find sort of, abandoned homemade bongs and
Yeah.
probably a used condom and broken bottles
Cigarettes
and
and
stuff like
yeah, all that
cigarette
stuff.
butts.
Yeah, the
It's one of
teenage
those things.
angst things. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really that. I think every town sort of has that place and something so special about those places because, you know, when you're a teenager, you're craving autonomy.
Yeah.
You always want to get, and so it's such a special. Those places are so special where you can just be yourself without
Yep.
fear
And there's
of
no adults around. Yeah.
yeah. But then there's something scary about that too because
Mm.
there's no adults around, and
Yeah.
suddenly it is like Lord of the Flies where it's its own little rules, its own little
Yeah.
politics, and so yeah, that was really the inspiration, and the ledge in the book is much higher and it's
Yeah.
much creepier and much more remote. But it still serves that purpose. It's where teenagers go to sort of blow off steam.
Yeah. Awesome. And thriller writing, it's tricky. It demands sort of I guess tight pacing, but then you need to be careful with the suspense. How do you balance building tension without giving too much away?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. I have sort of half an answer. I think a lot of it is intuitive. You kind of feel it. It's sort of
Yeah.
almost like there's a bit of a rhythm to it. But I have a couple of sort of rules that I put on myself. One of them is every single scene needs to bridge with the next scene. So, you know, I won't write a scene and then just drop into a completely new thing. One thing always leads into the next. And what that means is in every single scene you write, the plot needs to be advanced or the character needs to be advanced, or ideally both, usually both. That's sort of the rule.
Mhm.
And the other thing I do is I leave the end of every chapter, I kind of imagine it's a commercial break. We
Okay.
don't have ad breaks anymore because we watch
Right.
Netflix. But in the old days we did, and I kind of like the idea of, leaving it on a point where, okay, you've got 2 minutes while the ads go. You've got to run and pee and make a
Yeah.
sandwich, and then your brother's yelling out, "It's back on! It's back on!" You got to
Yes.
run back. So I kind of really, really think about that. And I think a lot of that comes from writing TV or writing film and TV. You've got to when you write a script, you really have to earn. They cost so much money to produce, so you've got to earn every single word, every line, every
Yeah.
moment, and so you've got to do everything you can with that scene. And so that's always just about pushing the story along
Mm.
and kind of just connecting it, making this series
Yeah.
of bridges. And it's not sort of, you know, someone said this better than me, but it's essentially, you know, I don't write this happened and this happened and this happened. It's this
Right.
happened, therefore that happens, therefore this, you know,
Yes.
so it sort of
Yeah.
bridges and feels.
Yes.
And then it's all about having enough puzzle pieces to give out. So I like to, you know,
Tease them out.
yeah, and a lot of that is what I do in the second draft. So when I've got to the end and I know exactly what's going to happen, you can go back and put and sort of load it up with clues and puzzle pieces and
Mm.
a few mystery beats, and then you know the character a bit better. You know where they're going, so you can kind of hint at that and do a bit of foreshadowing. But yeah, I think all of that is it's interesting though, because when you're writing a thriller, writing in genre, it's actually kind of a luxury because you already have a framework and you already have these things that sort of have to happen. So if someone goes missing or someone's murdered, well, someone's going to call the cops, and then the cops will
Right.
come. This happens, you know. And
Yeah.
so I think that I think a lot about that, and I think about a lot about you know what the genre needs and dictates, but also knowing the reader knows what to expect. So kind of playing with that as
Yes.
well. So it's really nice. But you've always got this with thrillers. You've always got this kind of a roadmap because you know because it is a genre. So yeah,
Yes. There's a recipe. And do you
yeah.
think this is something that you've kind of got more comfortable with each novel and something you've kind of become more masterful at is knowing how to sort of strike that balance? Or do you think you just got lucky from the first book and it came easily?
No, no, I think I would never say masterful, but you know, my self-esteem's not strong enough to say that. But I am getting, it is getting better. I think I am getting I'm getting better at it, and I'm getting more confident. And I think with you know, it's funny because my first book, my first book was my first book, but it was really the fifth book I tried to write, and the second one I finished,
Wow.
and the
Okay.
first one I thought was anywhere near good enough to show
Yeah.
anyone. And I think that you
I
know,
love
people
that you stuck with it.
yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean that's
Yeah.
a I don't know, that's a huge part of
Mm.
I think becoming a writer is you just got to stick to it.
Yeah.
But people say, "Oh, how long did it take you to write your first book?" And it's kind of 2 years, but really it took me the 15 years before that when I was writing all this terrible stuff as well. So I think it's just about you know, unless you're one of these frustrating geniuses who are born with it, for me, it's just about that muscle. And the more you do, and now that's all I do all day. So, you know, you get
Right.
more and more
Pretty
confident
good
and
at it. Yeah.
stronger. Yeah, but then this weird thing happens where as it gets easier, you kind of want to test yourself more. And because I
Mm.
don't think it should feel easy. I had this thing recently where I was writing what I thought was the fifth book, and I was just, you know, smashing through it, but it just felt I sort of felt a bit too easy,
Okay.
it
So
made
you
me
doubted how good it was, or
yeah, it made me really uncomfortable. And I actually I put it aside and started writing something else
wow.
and put some limitations on that story to kind of because I
Yeah.
think that you know, I think that a healthy, manageable dose of imposter syndrome
Yes.
is good. You know, I
Yeah.
don't think I always want to feel a little bit like I
You
never
don't want
want
to
to
be too cocky, do you?
exactly, yeah, because
Yeah.
that's when you'll have that rubbish book
Yeah.
and you know, so I think yeah.
Well, I think that's really inspiring to know that even somebody with the success that you've had can, doubt their work and
Oh
things
yeah.
like that.
Oh,
So
all the time.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's great. Um, and Christian, can you tell me, are there any themes or sort of takeaways that you hope to leave readers with after they finish The Ledge? For me, I mean, I got, the inevitable death of childhood, but also, the truth shall set you free. So that's the two themes that came to me. Is there anything
Yeah.
you kind of wanted readers to take away?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, with much smarter authors than me will really think about the themes and the questions and the things they want to say before they write. For me, it's something I find organically, and actually often I'm not, it's not until I finish the story that I look back and see what it was sort of about. And it's this really interesting thing because you see what themes are bubbling up from your subconscious and you kind of and as your body of work grows you see it's patterns and you think
Yeah.
oh you start to kind of psychoanalyze yourself so with me it was certainly as you said the truth will set you free and I think that's um the kind of the darker version of that is this is something that's across all my books, is that, how well can you ever know, how well do you know anyone you love? How well can you ever know
Mm,
anyone? And there's a real fear in that. But for this book, one of the things I found completely by accident was this sense of this sense of loyalty, and kind of the shades of loyalty. I think the book,
very
I
strong.
think really
Yes.
the whole book ended up being about loyalty. And I don't know if this is universal or if it's just groups of boys, but I know when I was a teenage boy, within groups of boys and men as
Mm,
well, loyalty is, it's valued, it's such currency, it's valued so
yeah.
high. And on the face of it, in a vacuum, loyalty's great. It's a really beautiful quality. But what the book was about, and I think what I must be sort of interested in, is when loyalty kind of brushes up against your morality. There's
Yeah.
that line, and
Mm,
you can have this really strong sense of morals and ethics, but then when loyalty starts pushing against that, and how
yes.
much you compromise your own values, and more and more of yourself kind of, you can feel it slipping away. And I know, um, I never did anything like what is portrayed in the book. I won't give
Right.
any
Not
spoilers.
that bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know I know I put loyalty in front of, when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I would do things to protect people that
Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable doing, but I kind of had to do. And I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And I'm 43 now, and the older I get, the more confident in myself I am, and
Yeah.
the more I kind of know my line, I know my limits, and I know myself. But when you're a kid and when you're a teenager, you're figuring all that stuff out. So if you're put in a position
Absolutely.
where, okay, you've got to help a friend, is your best friend, you love him, how much would you do? How much would you sacrifice of yourself
Right.
to sort of save him?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the what ended up being and all of that
Yeah.
was completely unintentional. But when I
Right.
looked back, that's what I think, that's
It
what I was sort
definitely
of
was portrayed.
nutting
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Absolutely. So, and you're right. I think teenagers definitely, they're not as secure. They're not as comfortable in their own skin yet. So I think they're
exactly.
probably prepared to do a little bit more, and the line's a little bit more blurred,
Yeah, for
which
sure.
is
Yeah.
scary when you've got, you're about to have teenagers. So
I know, I know. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You're closer. I've got a
Yeah.
7-year-old, and I'm already
Yes.
panicking.
Already. Yes. It's and Christine, I'd love to know, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing? Did you love writing when you were at school? Did you know from early on that that's what you would love to do if you could? Or did you
Yeah.
fall into it? You did.
No, I wanted to be. I was about. I mean, I wrote when I was really little kid. I remember when I was really young to have this thought. I think I was 10 or 11, and I was writing a story, and I sort of felt overwhelmed, because I suddenly understood that I can't possibly convey everything. If I'm telling a story in a room, I can't describe every single thing in that room. I've got to so that was a real frustrating thing. So I loved it forever, but it wasn't until I was around 17, I was in high school, and I wrote a short story, and my teacher read it out anonymously. And I, I just loved that. And
Mhm.
I've always sort of loved telling stories, but then from there, at 17, I made the very sensible decision that I was going to be a best-selling author by 25 years old.
Okay, no pressure.
25 seems like, a million
Really
years ago.
old back
Oh,
then. Yeah.
how old? I'm going to be such an old man by
Yep.
25. And then, that came and went, and I adjusted it a little bit, and I said, "Oh, I'll be 30. I'll be 30,
Okay.
And
Sure. Yeah.
I was 37 when I got published. But by then I'd long sort of, I certainly hadn't given up on I held on to the dream.
Yep.
The fact that I get to write for a living now is, I still can't believe it.
Like,
I've been doing it
pinch
for
me. Yeah.
5 or 6 years. It's incredible. Um, but before I got there, I sort of had this, it's really weird, but I had this very strange, almost like a vision, where I was, I'm 94, 95, and I was dead. And my grandkids were cleaning out my assisted living unit, and they opened a dusty drawer, and they found this big pile of unpublished manuscripts.
Manuscripts. Yep.
And I thought, what a cool thing. If that's what it is, what a cool thing. And
Yep.
they'll sit around and read it. And so I just sort of stopped. At one stage, I stopped. I was always pursuing it, but I stopped writing to be a writer.
Yep. Published. Yeah.
Just wrote for the joy of it, and because for me it is a joy. It's just my happy space. I love I love structure. I love characters. I just love how it looks on the page.
Mm,
it's such a joy to do. So, so I think I've always wanted to do it, but then, yeah, it did take me a very, very long time. I've worked, a crazy amount of jobs. I would just work casual jobs to supplement my habit,
love it. Yeah.
and yeah, I was an apple picker, and I worked at
Wow.
call centers and bottle shops, and I drove a food cart around a golf course. I was for a
You've done
time.
a lot of
Yeah, I've done heaps.
odd
Yeah,
jobs.
yeah. I'll do all
You
these
know,
crazy jobs
Mark
just to get
Lamprell,
paid.
the Australian writer, we chatted to him recently.
Hmm.
He got his big break driving like a portable toilet around the set of Grundy's.
That's
There
bizarre.
you
Wow,
go.
that's
Yes.
that's crazy.
But I love that all these jobs that you've done. And I think it's probably been character building for you, and you probably got a great deal from that. You probably didn't
Yeah,
realize at the time, but
that entire time I was just writing. I'd
mm,
write on weekends or nights or at work if I could. It became this thing. It was just this hobby that I loved,
yeah.
and so I was just kind of getting, and I was reading a lot, and I was watching a lot, and I was drawing inspiration from everything, and just working on that muscle. It's like a tennis player hitting the ball against the wall.
Yes.
I was just
Love
working on
that
it, and
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Great. And you have also had success, right, like screenwriting. So I loved clickbait, loved.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
do you find one format more fulfilling or one more challenging?
Yeah, it's funny because they both, depending on the day,
Okay.
I would say I enjoy one more than the other, but really books are. I mean, the process it speaks to each other in really interesting ways, especially the way I write books because they're very visual. You've got to earn every single word on that page, all of that sort of stuff. But with a book, it's still collaborative. You're working with a publisher and an editor, but it's your thing, it's your baby. So for better or worse, when you put it
Mm.
out, it's yours.
More
It's a product of
vulnerable.
you.
Right.
Yeah, and that is in one sense more fulfilling, of course, and it's,
Mm.
and it's your own thing because you're the kind of the owner and the author of that thing. But it's also scary because you're putting this thing out of the world that you
Absolutely.
can't hide behind anyone else.
I would be
And
terrified.
yeah, exactly. Whereas when you write for film and TV, and I don't mean this in a cynical way, but the writer is part of this big beautiful machine,
Yeah.
so there's producers, and then the director will come on, and you've got cast, but then you've
Mm.
got production designers and the studio, and then someone will say, you know you you have notes. Hopefully I've been really lucky to work with great people, so you have these great notes, but then sometimes you have to rewrite scenes because the episode's too long, or you've got to do things like, like during COVID, for example, we'd shot 6 episodes of Clickbait, and then we got shut down because of COVID, and then we eventually came back, and then we had to do a COVID pass of the script. So you'll notice that all of a sudden, in the last 2 episodes, a lot of people are standing outside, a
Right.
meter and a half from each other, and
Yeah.
there's actually also a scene where we had a child actor, and there's a scene where he
They were
walks
too
up the
big.
stairs,
Yeah.
and then when he gets to the top of that stairs, he's grown 6 inches.
Right.
But you have to do things like that. So it's a different thing. So when you put it out into the world, you're
Part
I'm
of
so,
a huge
so proud of it as
family.
well, but it's this
Yeah.
big shared thing.
Mm.
And I kind of love that. I love
Yeah.
that about screen. I love being part of that.
Yes.
I don't know. I love them both. It's really hard. Yeah,
To
it would
one.
be. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I had to choose, it would be like Meryl Streep in Sophie's
Oh.
Choice. It would be. It would be. Yeah, the stakes aren't quite as high as is in that film, but
Yeah.
but it would still be tough.
Okay. Um, and is there somebody that you trust, when you first done a manuscript? Is it like your wife, or do you have
Mm,
a friend? And would their feedback sort of shape revisions, or who do
yeah.
you go to first?
So my first reader is always my wife.
Ah,
Always makes it so much better. So
yeah.
so some is a uh, she's an incredible writer in her own right. We've actually co-written two Audible originals together. The most popular one is The Call, and she came up with the concept. She's, she's really, really, she's got a really great sense
Amazing.
of story, and she's just a really creative mind. And I think that, I think it can be dangerous to share your work with someone that close to you, because I think there's a temptation for people to tell you what you want to hear and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's perfect, it's great, you're so talented,"
Well done, honey.
Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, whereas my wife does not have that problem. She tells me
Right.
what's working, and
Yeah.
then she says, "This isn't working. How about this?" And she has been, you know, the twist in The Wife and the Widow,
Mm.
which is what so many people talk about. I knew what I wanted to do, but I had no idea how to do it. And I was actually really close to giving up on it until I asked her, "Hey, I've got this problem. I'm really stressed out." And she was quiet for 10 seconds, and she figured the whole thing out for me.
Oh, wow. So she was
While
instrumental to that twist.
all of my books, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, she kind of should take credit for that twist, which is annoying because people say, I love Wife of the Widow, I love the twist. And I
Yeah.
say, yeah, what else did you
Thank
like
you.
about it? And they say nothing else, just the twist. I hated everything else about it.
Yeah.
No, she's huge. And with Wild Place, my third book, the first draft she read had a completely different ending, and she said, "What about this?" And it's the ending in the book, which is
Wow. Okay.
so
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 she's
much
been
stronger.
very impactful.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's someone I really, really trust,
Yeah.
and you can talk about it's such a joy to
Mm.
have someone you can go for a walk and talk about.
And so convenient. Aren't you
I
lucky?
know,
That's
I know. It's
amazing.
just in the
Yeah.
next room. It's amazing.
Super lucky. Yeah. Do you ever struggle with writer's block, Christian? Or not so much anymore?
No,
No.
no, I've never had writer's block, and I think that is because for so many years, I mean, touch wood,
Yeah.
but for so many years, writing was something I had to do in these snatches of time.
Mm.
I've got 2 hours before work. I've
Yeah.
got to do it. So I think it was so precious, and it was sort of, it would build up. It would build up and build up, and so I was so ready to
It
do
should
it.
come out. Yeah.
I think I do a few things to help as well. I got this, actually, Sum's dad, my father-in-law, who sadly passed away back in 2014, I think. He was this prolific screenwriter in the 70s and 80s in Australia. His name was Everett DeRoche, and he wrote all these amazing Australian horror films, Razorback and Long Weekend and Patrick, all
Okay.
this great stuff.
Yeah.
And Quentin Tarantino is a huge fan of his, all this kind of cool stuff. And one bit of advice he gave me was, he said that he would end each day right before a scene he was really excited to write, which meant the next morning he would run to his, probably a word processor in those days, but he would
Mm.
run back to the story. And that's what I do every day before I break for lunch, when I end the day. It's right before a scene I've been itching to
Yeah.
write. So I think there's certain tricks you can do.
That
You can
is
do
an
like
awesome,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that sort of exhilaration live,
yeah,
pumping
yeah.
through the
I think
veins. That's very
I think
clever.
that's part
Yeah.
of it. Yeah,
Love that. Any authors or books that you absolutely love?
loads.
You
Big ones
mentioned,
for me. Big ones for me are Stephen King
yeah.
and Haruki Murakami, Gillian Flynn. I really love Harlan Coben, Dan Winslow. I love all of those. Um, One of my favorite books of all time is sort of a thriller, but not really. It's called The Beach by Alex Garland. They made a movie out of it,
I've seen the
which,
movie, haven't read the book. Yes.
yeah, the movie was
Okay.
fine,
Yeah.
but the book, I reread that book so often.
Mhm.
It's absolutely fantastic. Certain books, um, Jaws by Peter Benchley. The book is so
Yeah.
incredible. And then
Okay.
close to home, I love, I'm a big fan, and we're buddies now, but JP Pomare is a great, I would always get on his stuff. Chris Hammer, all the big ones, Michael Robotham, Anna Downs is really great. Red River Road, her most recent one, is really strong. Yeah, but I read, it's funny though, because this weird thing happens when you, you get published. You have any sort of measure of success. You get sent books, advanced copies of books to Blurb, to put, to
Ah,
endorse,
there
and
you go.
which is fantastic. But
Yeah.
it means that I'm just reading so many thrillers
Constant.
because it's
Yeah.
my
The
genre. So
genre. Yeah.
So what I do now is I alternate. I read one of those, and then one of my own things, and more I'm sort of going outside
That
that
genre.
genre, you know, just
Yeah.
because of something different. Or I'll, if all else fails, I'll just reread a Stephen King book, or
Right.
an Audrey
Okay.
Curran. Yeah.
Has your 7-year-old developed a taste for thrillers yet? I mean, her grandfather was in the
Yeah,
book as well, and
it's
yeah, with a
in the
dad like
family.
you, yeah, in the
Yeah, no,
same genes.
she's got to be a little bit older before she
Older.
reads my stuff, but she is very impressed by this. The Ledge is dedicated to her, so
Yeah.
she's come along actually because she's old enough now to come along with me to a lot of book signings and stuff, and
How
she's
awesome.
been coming along and she's been signing her own name under the dedication page,
Oh,
and
that's so
occasionally
cute.
she draws a picture. And yeah, we were at the airport the other day, and she went and got the book down from the shelf, and went to the dedication page and went up to some stranger and said, "Oh, this is me." And, the stranger sort of, "Oh, okay," it was like, "What's this weird kid talking about?" But no, I think she's
She gets
starting
a kick out of that.
slowly starting to, yeah, she's sort of
Yeah.
understanding, but it's not. I don't know. It's funny because she's so used to it. It's just not a big deal.
Right.
I when The Ledge came out, I said, "Hey, do you want to go around and we'll look in some bookshops and we'll go and have a go look at my book on the shelf?" And she said, "That just sounds really boring," And so she's really not that impressed, which is what happens when when you grow up with it. It's like, no big deal. She'll go in the opposite direction, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just heard, completely forgotten his name now, but The Day My Bum Went Psycho. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's kind of a
Oh
children's.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Apparently, that is his 3-year-old daughter's bottom on the cover. And
Brilliant.
she loved it when she was younger, was mortified because he would do lots of talks at her school every year. And I think when she was like 10 to 15, got mortified and said, "Don't mention it's me." Now I think she's in her 20s and she loves to claim
Now
it.
she can
So,
love it. Yeah.
yeah, quite funny. Um, and so, Christian, there's quite intense themes in The Ledge. After writing something that's quite intense like that, do you need to recharge? Do you need to reset and have some downtime, or not really?
I've got pretty good at switching off. Like, when I'm
Yeah.
in the moment, when I'm writing, I feel really intense. There's I won't spoil it obviously, but a scene in this, the most intense scene in this book.
Mm.
You know, I'm emotionally exhausted after it. And
Yes.
you kind of have to feel it, and there's tears in
Mm.
your eyes, and it's really fun, and sad, but also amazing. But you kind of no, getting pretty good at switching off. But I do watch a lot of disposable stuff. And
Yeah.
I'll often watch comedies, or just anything that has nothing to do with
The
what
mind numbing.
I'm
Yeah.
working on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I used to watch a lot of true crime stuff, and I used to listen to a lot of things like that. And now I'll listen to a comedy podcast or something completely
Yeah.
different. But I think it's this weird thing. A couple of people have pointed out that that in Australia anyway, crime writers, we everyone says we're the nicest group. It's kind of like high school.
How
There's the
ironic.
crime
Yeah.
writers, there's the
Yeah.
romance, there's the literary fiction who are the cool ones.
Mhm.
But the crime writers and the thriller writers
The
we're
nice
all
people.
very nice and well adjusted. And I think that part of that is you kind of spend the day writing about this dark stuff, but
Yeah.
you don't really, you get it all out, you purge it. But that's another thing that I had to really think about when I was writing The Ledge, because the protagonist in The Ledge is he's a writer. He's a
Mhm.
crime writer.
Yes.
And that started because I was super lazy. I really wanted to, it's really hard to come up with good jobs for characters. And I knew I wanted him to go back to his hometown. Human remains are found. He's got to go back. And I didn't want to write the scene where he's got to call his boss and ask for time off. And I didn't have to worry, what's he going to do
How
about
do you get
work?
back?
And I
Yeah.
thought, well, if human remains were found in my hometown and I had to go back, that's fine. I've got plenty of time on my hands. My own boss.
Yes.
So I'll just do that. But then you know, again, you start to put more and more of yourself into it, and I suddenly started to think, why do we write these things? What does draw me to these dark things? And
Mm.
in a book, in this book, it was great because you can see how the trauma he went through as a kid, how it affects him
Yes.
as a
Yeah.
writer. But I didn't, I didn't
Have
have
that
the
trauma.
trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is something that I suddenly started to think about and think.
Mm. What
Um,
drew you into that?
Yeah,
Or-
because I didn't start out wanting to write thrillers. I tried to
Mm,
write literary fiction and comedy and sci-fi, and it wasn't until I started writing a thriller and really leaned into what I loved as a reader that I thought that I felt that was my
that
thing.
was your
And
thing. Yeah.
I don't know why. Yeah, really, it's a
Interesting.
mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You found what you love and
yeah.
where you stayed. Awesome. I'm just going to check if anybody watching has a question for Christian. If you just want to pop your name into the chat and you can ask him, or if you don't
Mm.
want to put your camera on, you can just type the question in and I can read it out. And while we are waiting for any questions to come through, we did have somebody, one of our members named Jules, sent a question in advance for you, Christian.
Oh,
She
great.
said she's a big fan and she thinks you're a fascinating writer. She would love to know if you would ever consider doing a workshop or course to assist emerging writers.
Yeah, I would for sure. I think, you know, early on, you know, after the first book, I would have thought, oh no, I don't have anything to share. But no, I think yeah, I would actually love that. What I would love to do is sort of, you know, break it into sort of a list of things that I wish I had have known
Yeah.
ahead of time. And the big lessons for me were you know, don't wait until your work's perfect because it'll never ever be perfect. And publishers and agents, they're not looking for a perfect story. They're looking for a story that actually they can make better by putting a little bit of themselves into it, you know. So that was a big thing. And the other big thing I had to learn, which is so obvious in retrospect, was you know, just hit the send button. Just do it, you know, just start getting your work out there. And you know, Stephen King, he wrote this amazing memoir called On Writing. And in it he says a million wonderful things, but one of the things he says is, you know, you should write with the door closed, rewrite with the door opened. And what he means is when you're writing your first draft, it's yours, you know, write
Mhm.
without fear of judgment. But when you're writing the second draft, when you're rewriting, it's time to let open that door, let other voices into the room. And man, I wish I had known that, you know. So
Really
if
right.
I were to do a workshop, it would be, you know, 70% craft,
Yeah.
30% the business, you know,
Yeah.
and what I yeah, things I wish I had known. But yeah,
Well,
maybe one day.
if you ever do, please let us know. I
I'll
think
let
we've
Jules
got
know.
a market for you.
Yeah.
um, Tammy has a question for you. Tammy, do you want to ask Christian?
Hey Tammy.
Hi, Christian. How are you going? I'm so
Good, how are you?
excited that you have come and joined us today. It's so exciting. Um, just something related to what you talked about earlier, about how you love writing because it allows the reader to have that imagination that film doesn't do. But we're in an age today with Netflix, and you see writers put out their debut novels that, you know, there's this streaming war. Do you reckon your books would transfer to Netflix without giving the plot and that twist away too much?
Yeah, it's funny because you know, I sold the rights to my first book, and you know, there's various you know things I'm not allowed to talk about, but I've always thought that I think because I write in film and TV, I use all my visual the film and TV twists in film and TV, and I sort of save my I call them format twists. I don't know if that's right, but it's I call them that because it's there's the sort of twists that you really rely on it being a book, you know, which means it makes it very difficult to adapt to a film. You know, I won't spoil anything, but you know, Wife and the Widow would be they'd all be really hard. This book with this twist would be very difficult. Actually, if the twist turns out in I'm writing book 5 at the minute, and if I do end up nailing this twist, it can just never be a film. It's just not going to work as a film. So I do think part of it is you know, is that, and I think that, you know, I never really write, and maybe it's because I have the luxury of working in both fields, but when I'm writing a book, I never think about it being a show or how it would be adapted, because I think I just want to focus on the experience of what it is. And I think but what that means is that yeah, you do make things that will only work in a book.
Thank you.
No worries.
And we have another question from Kathy. She loves your books. For the Ledge, she listened to the audio and she wants to know why you did not narrate the book yourself.
Oh my God. If it was up to me to narrate the book, it would still be being recorded. You know, I had to, for The Wife and the Widow, there's an author's note, and Audible, whoever it was, and it wasn't Audible, whoever it was said, can you record just the author's note? So the author's note is me, and it's it's a page and a half, and it took me hours and hours. I was so bad at
To
it.
record it.
And it really made me appreciate the skill of, because when you get a good narrator on an audiobook, I don't know, I've got a few I love that I will, you know, they pull you in. There's a couple of people who I've actually listened to books I've never heard of, because I'll read a book that I want to read with a great narrator, and then I think, what else have they done? Because I love their voice so much.
Wow. And so you'll
They do
Google
great.
the narrator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can click on it
Yeah.
through Audible. You click on the
Yeah.
name, it shows you what else they've done. And that's what good people. But no, I would be just terrible at it. I'm even bad at every now and then I've got to do a reading. Whenever anyone says, do you want to do a reading? I always say, please don't make me do a reading, because what I do is I just sort of stumble on my words, and as I'm reading, I sort of want to edit. I want to edit what I've written. I was like, oh, well, I think in my head, why did I phrase it that way? And I kind of try
Right.
to change it on the fly, and that's what I would be doing. It would be a disaster.
And actually, can I ask, does the author get to pick the narrator, or is that something the publisher will do?
You
Or is it in
you get
collaboration?
you get what I'm convinced is a very tokenistic,
Approval.
yeah. So you get sent maybe three, the top three auditions,
Okay.
and they say, we'd love to get your opinion, but this is the one we want, and hopefully your opinion align. I always get,
Matches up.
and to be honest with you, I always you know, I, I think they're professionals in their field for a reason. So
Yeah.
unless it's really jarring, or I really have a strong feeling about it, I will usually just sort of follow their lead. Same with
Okay.
covers. I think that I look at book covers, and what might appeal to me might not appeal to a mass audience. So much of it is so much of the job is, hey, I can do the writing part, but
You do
you
the
guys
marketing.
handle, that's what you do. So yeah, I do get sent auditions, and I do weigh in, but I do strongly get the sense that if I disagreed, if I disagreed strongly, they'd listen, but
Yeah.
they're kind of, they're worded in a way, when you're talking to someone in conversation, when you go to someone for advice, and
Yeah.
what advice you want to get, so you
Mhm.
phrase your question in a way.
Question that way.
You
Absolutely.
think I
Yes.
should do this, don't you? It's
Yes.
that sort
I
of
do that
phrase.
to my husband all the time.
Yeah.
I think we have one more question for you here. What
Yeah.
motivated you to write The Ledge? I think you've kind of touched on that inspiration with your
Yeah. If there was a moment, it was just I think I'd reread The Body, which is a Stephen King novella. It turned out that was adapted into Stand By Me. Maybe I'd reread that. I reread it every couple of years, and but it's something I've wanted to do for a very, very long time, and I don't really know what that spark was to do it now, but yeah, it was certainly that kind of. I just wanted to write. I've wanted to write a coming of age forever, really. So it felt like the right time.
time. Perfect. Thank you, Joy, for that question.
Mm.
And Neris has said, I don't have a question, but this was the first of your books I've read, and I loved it. We'll be reading your others.
Oh, thank you so much. I love hearing that.
That's great. One final question before we let you go. I know we've pulled you up quite a long time. Can
No.
you give us any hints? I know you said you're working on book number 5.
Yes.
Anything else you're working on? And can you drop any hints about when that will be coming, or?
Well, in theory, it will be sort of this time next year. But I
Okay.
did say that a couple of people I did say that about The Ledge about a year before it came out. So
Me too.
that's in theory. And people have been saying, I ran into a woman recently and said, I came to one of your events and you told me it would be out Christmas 2023. I'm so sorry. I really meant it at the time. No, I really don't want to wait as long. Wild Place was 2021, and The Ledge is 2024, so I don't want to wait quite as long, but it's been yeah, I'm the first draft is due in March, so, and I think I'll hit that deadline.
Soon. Okay.
Yeah, pretty soon, and it's It's pretty cool. I won't be very good at pitching it yet, but this might completely change by the time it comes out. But right now it's just all set in one house, and there's 4 characters in the whole thing, and it's another thriller, and it has a twist that, man, if I can pull it off, it'll be really good. It's very,
Amazing.
very challenging, but fingers
Fingers
crossed.
crossed. Well,
Yeah.
you did a very tricky one in The Ledge and you pulled that off, so I'm sure you can do it.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Kathy has said it's been a great session. You're welcome, Kathy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so Christian, thank you so much for your time with us today. It has been fascinating and very entertaining. You've been really fun. Big congratulations on, all your success and for writing such an amazing, memorable story. And we cannot wait to see, fingers crossed, in 12 months, we see book number 5. So
Yeah, I'll have to write it again so I can come back and do this again, because it was great. And yeah, honestly, thanks everyone for coming in and listening to this in the future whenever you listen to it or watch it. And yeah, I just love people who read books, and it's amazing. So thank you.
awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody, and take care and Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See ya.